clothes are just so important to all of us, right? They're not just there for protection or just as coverage. They are our introduction to the world. For somebody who doesn't know us, right? They tell anybody who sees us who we are. So why wear something that doesn't spark a little bit of joy in you, right? To spark a little joy maybe in someone else as well.
Welcome to the Create Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Francesca Muston, VP of WGSN Fashion. We've just seen New York Fashion Week close, and as we record this, we're going into London Fashion Week. Today, we'll be discussing the trends we're seeing on the catwalks and how these trends tie into the wider trends we're tracking at WGSN. Joining me from South Africa to discuss this topic is Kim Cupido, WGSN Senior Strategist of Catwalks. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Francesca. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So this is your first time on the podcast, Kim, which is really exciting. So do you want to start off by just telling our listeners a little bit about what you do at WGSN and why it is that you're our eyes and ears on catwalks?
I'm Kim Cupido, Catwalk Senior Strategist here at WGSN. And I join you today from a thankfully sunny Cape Town, South Africa today. I have a fashion background that started as an independent designer before joining the fashion retail industry, and then ultimately joining WGSN as a senior strategist for women's wear. But now my focus is on catwalks, and me, along with a great team of other editors and strategists, what we're looking to do is to provide our WGSN clients with fast, accurate, and actionable catwalk runway coverage and analysis.
Give me a trend that you've seen on the catwalks and let's just go.
Where I'd want to start is, before we get onto the sort of silhouette trends, is to start with color. Because as we've seen with New York so far, or now that New York's come to a close, it was quite a upbeat runway. There was a lot of enthusiasm on the runway. There was a lot of joy. It was a joyous sort of runway. It's sort of very upbeat. So what I want to start with is color and what we're calling optimistic color. These sort of joyous, bright shades. And we saw this come through with quite upbeat yellow and red shades. So we had two main colors for yellow. There was the sort of radiant, warm yellow that we called Rayflower, which is actually one of our key colors for Spring-Summer 25. And that's a very upbeat yellow. And then we also have Panna Cotta, which is a sort of soft, neutral yellow, very tactile, makes you want to touch. We've seen it on, say, knitwear come through quite a lot. At Philip Lim, he did this sort of fuzzy Panna Cotta
those eyelash
jumpers.
Yarn knits. Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, and it just invites you to just want to touch it. Whereas Rayflower just draws the eye. It's that sort of warm, bright yellow that draws the eye. And then we also have the sort of statement reds come through. We have two statement reds in our palette for Spring-Summer 25. We have an annual sort of orange fiery red called Flame, which is very warm. And then we also have a more, shall we say, saturated red in crimson. And we seen both of those come through on the runway. It's very eye-catching, very draws the eye. And these sort of colors are quite important on the runways right now because we're still seeing a deprioritization of prints. So even though in New York, we've seen more print this season than we did last, there is an uptick on print again, thankfully, but the priority is still on color over print. So these sort of bright shades that draw the eye really give minimalist silhouettes a really striking appearance.
Right. I think this is quite interesting, right? Because yellow in particular, it can be a very difficult colour and it can be quite a difficult colour commercially. And that kind of disconnect, I guess, between how people feel about yellow from an engagement on social media point of view versus the reality of actually wearing and buying those very, very bold shades of yellow. And as you say, some of the designers here that we're seeing it's kind of really strong head to toe looks, right, of yellow.
Yes, we've had strong head to toe suiting in yellow, like everything from the suit to the shirt, sometimes the tie involved as well, just all in yellow.
Okay, so if we now sort of move on and think about that red, could you want to tell us a little bit more about where you've seen that and how your sort of thoughts are on the red?
Yes, that red is such a statement red. The first show I saw it in during New York Fashion Week was at Alaya, where he did the sort of sculptural maxi dress. It was a more, they say commercial take, but really, is it right? But a more ready to wear take on the 3D model dress that they did for couture. And that was just such a bright, striking shade. I think it was day 2 or 3 of New York Fashion Week, where it really just caught your eye. But we've also seen it in a more commercial sense. We saw it at Tory Burch, where she did it in, I think it was knitted tank tops. She also did it as part of a polka dot on sort of an oversized trench and jacket. And so we really see the sort of range of that red. It is a very striking color that can be used for, say, more occasion wear, but it's definitely a color that can also come into different sort of categories, from knitwear to outerwear as well.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting, right? Particularly as we think about catwalk data and how we're looking at catwalk data and catwalk analysis. And, we have an image recognition AI, which as soon as the images come in is able to classify them by color. So we're getting a very instant read on color. So this is a great start, great powerful opening to the season to New York. Do you want to hit us up with another trends that you've seen?
Yes, so I think we stick to that sort of upbeat mood. We head from color into a trend we're calling city to beach. And these are looking at quite hybrid pieces that can do duty across, well, do different styling duties, whether it's your everyday work wardrobe, or if you want to pack those same pieces into your luggage and head off to the coast, right? So whenever I think of the city to beach trend, I always think of 4 Bs, right? So it's business to beach, or it's boardroom to boardwalk. So it's that taking you from your everyday setting, from your daily grind, into something that's upbeat. But those pieces can translate to both. So I think that's very special, and that's what we're seeing come through on the New York runways as well. We saw it come through in quite oversized shapes for shirts, a slouchy shape for trousers. For prints, we're seeing the influence of like preppy and nautical stripes coming through. There's some brands that, when you think about it, probably the obvious, Ralph Lauren being one of them. You'd think, yes, that is a very city to beach label there. We also saw it come through at Tommy Hilfiger, and then some shirt dresses, these really great shirt dresses at Proenza Schule as well.
Yeah, we had it actually as one of our top trends for this year was the beach to business shirt, and we've actually just published a travel wear intelligence report, and in fact, Sarah recorded, if I remember rightly, a podcast about that report. So definitely go back and have a listen to that. It was a really good listen. I remember a bit in there somewhere about Sarah talking about how you needed coats with more pockets because she'd been smuggling espresso cups out of Marrakesh and run out of room in her luggage. And I think she was certainly bringing a lot of that lived experience to that intelligence report. Thinking forward to our top trends for 2025, little sneak peek preview for you, but the one that we felt strongest about from the fashion team was the Day J, which is, as you might imagine, of course, is the pajama that you wear during the day. I did get immediate requests back from our CEO Carla requesting some links of where she might buy some of these DJs. So yeah, expect to see her in a pair on her podcast at some point soon, I guess. But thinking about the catwalks in particular, did you see any of that kind of pajama dressing coming through on the show so far?
We have seen some of them start coming through. At Maria McManus, she had these really great oversized shirt and slouchy trouser silhouettes in these sort of really light cottons and linens that really play really well into the DJ. But also quite interesting coming through very strongly in menswear because, of course, New York was a men's and women's season. But we saw it come through in very gender neutral silhouettes. At Todd Snyder, again, the sort of oversized shirt, oversized tunic, but paired with a matching Bermuda shorts. And that's a very gentle neutral silhouette that can work across both markets. At Sermon Series, we saw a really great version of that in a sort of a summer stripe that had this bit of a wavy effect to it. So it sort of evoked the look of waves going through, so a coastal feeling to it. So really relaxed silhouettes, really relaxed prints with these really lightweight cotton and linens coming through.
You're listening to the WGSN podcast, Create Tomorrow. We're talking about the trends we're seeing on the catwalks for New York Fashion Week and discussing how these trends link into the wider trends we're tracking at WGSN. I'm your host, Francesca Muston, VP of WGSN Fashion, and I'm joined by Kim Cupido, WGSN's Senior Strategist at Catwalks. Okay, Kim, so we've had the optimistic colour and we've had the travel dressing. What next? What else have we seen on the runways so far?
Next, we're going to move on to elevated everyday. And this is an evolution of our low-key luxury trends. So if anybody's read any sort of fashion media of probably the last few years, we know about the importance of low-key luxury, right? The low-key, high-quality, sort of classic cuts to pieces that have longevity, that have a trans-seasonal appeal, that's going to look as great in your closet today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? So we've seen this sort of almost elevated basics come through very strongly. And what we're seeing for spring, summer 25 is an elevation of that. So we're building on that sort of low-key luxury looks, but we're adding a bit of a personality. We're adding considered design details. We're adding trims, maybe some texture, maybe an unexpected color. And we're just giving those pieces more of a zhuzh, if you want to put it like that, right? So a great example of this is at Michael Kors. And he took a few examples of the pencil skirt, which we don't usually consider a high fashion item anymore, right? It's a sort of perennial that's just there all the time. And what Michael Kors did is he added these really great floral applique in the same material as the skirt, but it just gave it that extra textural touch that was just quite beautiful, right? And he did this also in lace, so a pencil skirt with this this floral trim or a lace as well. And we saw that happen again at Ulla Johnson. She also used a little floral applique to elevate her pencil skirts. Proenza Schuler had a really great example using these oversized belts and buckles on their trench coats, and especially at the neck. So you had this really great big buckle detail at the neck, but still within the same palette and within the same fabrication as the actual coat, so that it isn't too jarring. It won't date the coat too much. Halsey had really great pearl clusters on a cardigan silhouette, so it really just elevated that knitwear piece. And then we've seen just a host of reworked shirts, whether they're featuring pleats or lace borders, and especially the voluminous sleeves. The sort of extravagant sleeves are a big call out for spring summer 2025, and we saw that come through elevating these shirts as well. So really great move on from like basic pieces and the pieces that people really need in their closets, but just adding that sort of extra bit of personality to it.
It's that, isn't it? It's showing how those very classic pieces don't have to be boring, but you can still have that expression of personality and giving people that reason to buy and having that attachment to it. I think is kind of what we've seen come through in a really, really beautiful way. And that trend, elevated every day, that you're referring to was a trend which was related to one of our big macro trends called common connections. And a big part of that trend is really about how people connect back to who they really are.
Yes, absolutely. That is probably the driving force behind that style, because clothes are just so important to all of us, right? They're not just there for protection or just as coverage. They are our introduction to the world. For somebody who doesn't know us, right? They tell anybody who sees us who we are. So why wear something that doesn't spark a little bit of joy in you, right? To spark a little joy maybe in someone else as well.
So do you want to give us some examples of some of the pieces that you've seen on the catwalks, Kim, that you think have got this kind of elevated, everyday, emotional durability to them?
Yeah, I think when I think about it right now, there are these really great pieces, like I mentioned before, the Francesca trench coat, right? Where it's a very classic silhouette. It's easily recognizable. It will look as great 10 years from now, but just adding in that sort of extra personality with the large buckles. Those are sort of things that will really resonate really well with consumers who are looking for pieces that are durable, that have that sort of longevity, because it's a silhouette that is easily recognizable. It is easily covetable, even, right? If we think about the sort of trend silhouettes, it's that sort of piece that you always want to keep in your closet because you know it's not going anywhere. You know it's never going to fade out of style. So that's the piece that really, really resonated to me. Besides all the others, like it's sort of really great tailored trousers that we see just across collections. I think that piece that I mentioned about the Brianza Shula trench coat is the one piece that really stood out to me. And maybe it's just because it stood out to me personally, right? Even though it's a women's wear collection, it really stood out to me as a menswear customer. But that's also what it means for customers, for consumers, right? You don't have to love everything that you see on the runways. You don't have to love everything that you see on TikTok in the stores. But if there's that one piece that really just resonates with you, that is the piece that's going to be with you for seasons to come.
Let's talk a bit about creativity on the runways then. What would you say we're sort of seeing in terms of the sort of most exciting creative direction?
There is quite a almost fantastical element going on the catwalks. We've called it Digitopia. It's part of our Digitopia like macro trend. It combines a real life craft with sort of AI innovations, and it creates playful sensorial looks, so looks that either are drawing the eye or drawing the touch. And this is pinned by sort of like digitally enhanced designs where AI or sort of creative tools are being used to stimulate human creativity. And we're seeing that come through quite nicely on the runways. And one of the things that I really love about how it's being interpreted on the runways is we're getting these sort of, when people think of digital inspired designs, they think of usually things that are quite sleek, quite cold sometimes. Even if they're seeing it on the computer screen that's quite bold, vibrant colors, it seems very unobtainable, maybe not something you can touch. It's very visual, which is great. But what I really love about how it's being interpreted on the runways is that our designers are bringing very tactile elements into their pieces. They're bringing in these sort of haptic knits, these sort of fuzzy knits that you really just want to reach out and touch. They're bringing in bolder shapes. They're exploring with silhouette and detail. So I think that's a really great interpretation of these sort of digitally AI inspired trends that bring it onto the runway in a very tactile way.
What's interesting here is, of course, there's AI that's going to do some of the heavy lifting for the designer, but it's more how designers are now responding to what is essentially a sort of change in expectations of what the fantastical looks like, right?
Yes, and not only a change in expectations on what the fantasticals would look like, but a change in expectations from their customers as well in what they expect designers to be able to produce, right? So one of the great things about AI, and especially a lot of the AI fashion that we see online and on social media, is that it's sparked sort of hunger for something more, as a more fantastical design from customers, from the everyday viewer, right? And that translates into designers thinking maybe a little outside the box, right? So if I put on my designer hat from, let's not say how many years ago, but if I put on my designer hat from back then, and I think about the design process for a designer, we're not usually just sketching something to be fantastical. We have the knowledge of how a seam is constructed, what is needed in order to create certain type of volume, the sort of nitty-gritty ins and outs of how a garment is made. And that informs your design as you design your pieces, right? And what AI is doing, it's giving designers the sort of, should I say, the freedom to experiment again, because they can see the hunger that sort of fantastical design has created in the broader public, and it allows them again to explore that creativity, to not be confined by the constraints of, well, this is where a seam should go and this is what a seam should do, instead of going, how do we adapt this to create something more special.
Thank you to my guest, Kim Cupido, WGSN Senior Strategist at Catwalks. If you're a WGSN subscriber, look out for more fashion forecasts available at WGSN.com. And if you're not a subscriber, please do come and discover our services. We're constantly publishing new content focusing on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries, which include interiors, food and drink, beauty, consumer tech, and sports and outdoor. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our next episode. In the meantime, you can catch the CEO of WGSN, Carla Busashi, next week on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow, where she'll be joined by Liam Mayer, VP of Global Creative Director of Product at Danish shoe brand Echo, who's discussing his new book, Men's Wear. I'm your host, Francesca Muston. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast, and we'll see you next time.